Imagine an artificial intelligence promised to change medicine and business forever. In 2011, IBM paraded Watson after a Jeopardy victory and declared a new era. The applause that night described a technological myth taking shape in real time. Millions of dollars and the trust of corporate boards were about to follow that myth. The Jeopardy win was thrilling and confusing at the same time. A machine answering wordplay and trivia made headlines and ignited imaginations across the business world. People projected human intelligence onto statistical pattern matching and clever engineering. That projection turned into a narrative about a universal thinking machine before the underlying reality was fully understood. IBM seized the moment and built a story about an AI revolution. Executives described Watson as an engine that would transform healthcare, finance, and customer service overnight. The story relied on metaphors of medical breakthroughs and boardroom reinvention to win imagination and budget. Those metaphors would later clash painfully with the messy realities of data, regulation, and industry incentives. Healthcare became the marquee promises stage for Watson's potential impact. IBM told a story about cancer diagnoses and treatment recommendations becoming faster and smarter because of Watson. Hospital executives and venture capitalists were handed glossy slide decks promising measurable improvements in patient care. Those promises set expectations so high that any operational or technical friction would later look like betrayal. IBM spent billions acquiring startups and building partnerships to scale Watson quickly. They bought firms, invested in data platforms, and deployed an army of salespeople to sell an AI dream. The company launched massive marketing campaigns that associated Watson with intelligence and modernity. All of these investments added cost and complexity long before any clear product market fit had been demonstrated. Under the gloss, Watson was not a single unified intelligence, but an assemblage of software modules. It relied heavily on statistical models, curated data sets, and human engineering to perform domain tasks. Many of the systems were brittle when faced with messy real-world data. The difference between carefully structured Jeopardy clues and fragmented clinical records proved far more consequential than anyone expected. Early pilots were heralded as proof points, but often remained contained and partial. Hospitals ran pilots that showed narrow successes with hand-picked data and controlled workflows. When scaled to full clinical environments, those pilots frequently failed to reproduce their initial performance. The gap between boutique success and enterprise reliability began to look alarmingly wide and expensive to bridge. One of the most publicized areas of failure was oncology and cancer treatment recommendations. IBM signed partnerships with major hospitals promising that Watson would recommend therapies based on scientific literature and patient data. Reports emerged showing erroneous suggestions and recommendations that were irrelevant or unsafe for specific patients. Those mistakes eroded trust and raised hard questions about clinical validation and accountability. The technical reasons for those clinical failures were mundane and instructive. Watson struggled with inconsistent medical records, missing data, and hospital-specific protocols that had not been encoded into its models. The system required curated training data and extensive human input to align with local standards of care. That dependence on labor, intensive customization made scaling across diverse hospitals slow and prohibitively expensive. IBM's sales and consulting teams sometimes escalated the problem by overselling capabilities to skeptical buyers. In meetings and proposals, they framed Watson as a near-autonomous decision-maker rather than a decision support tool. Hospital leaders and procurement teams bought into a narrative about transformation more than a contract about careful incremental deployment. This failure of expectations management created reputational risks that were hard to undo. Beyond healthcare, Watson's business applications often underwhelmed in finance and customer service. Automated call center solutions and trading analytics rarely provided the promised economic upside without substantial customization. Companies found that off. The shelf AI promised by marketing material translated into expensive projects requiring teams of engineers. Those projects consumed time and capital while delivering marginal improvements in key performance metrics. Integration complexity became a recurring theme and a hidden cost for many customers. Legacy systems and fragmented corporate data required bespoke connectors and custom pipelines to feed queries into Watson. Those engineering efforts often exceeded the budgets allocated for initial deployments and extended timelines dramatically. Executives began to question whether the technological promise justified the operational pain and costs being reported back from the field. Internally, IBM wrestled with productization choices and shifting corporate priorities. Teams building research prototypes were separated from the sales teams promising enterprise deployments, creating inevitable friction. The company reorganized Watson multiple times, trying to find a business model that matched both investor expectations and client realities. Those reorganizations created strategic drift and slowed the necessary learning cycles vital to building robust products. Financial consequences began to show in quarterly reports and investor presentations over several years. Revenues attributed to Watson faltered as lengthening sales cycles and disappointing contracts became public knowledge. The company took large charges and wrote down goodwill associated with healthcare investments that did not perform as expected. These write-downs were visible signs that the business case for Watson had been overstated in earlier years. Eventually, IBM announced the sale of Watson Health assets for a fraction of what had been invested. The deal was framed as an opportunity for a new chapter, while critics called it a cautionary tale about tech hubris. The sale crystallized the financial and strategic costs of betting big on an underproven platform. For many observers, it signaled the end of one of the boldest corporate attempts to sell AI as an immediate panacea. Industry reactions mixed relief, schadenfreude, and careful reflection about promises versus delivery. Some commentators argued that Watson had simply arrived decades too early for the available data and infrastructure. Others said that the product management and sales culture had turned a promising platform into an overhyped liability. That debate about timing versus execution continues to shape how companies communicate AI capabilities to prospective customers. If Watson failed to deliver on many commercial promises, it still left useful technical work and lessons behind. The teams built advances in natural language processing and knowledge graphing that influenced later systems. Engineering artifacts and scholarly papers disseminated into the wider research community and seeded later projects. Those quieter contributions matter, even if the commercial narrative ended in disappointment. Watson's story is also a cautionary chapter in the broader AI hype cycle we see repeating today. Every generation of AI produces a wave of miracles followed by a trough of disillusionment, and then measured maturation. The pattern teaches that timelines are usually optimistic, while technical complexity and social integration requirements are often underestimated. Recognizing these cycles helps managers and technologists avoid the worst excesses of overpromise and underdeliver. There were human costs to the mismatch between expectations and reality that are easy to overlook. Engineers, clinicians, and administrators invested time and careers into making Watson work at scale, often under impossible constraints. That human labor was frequently invisible in marketing narratives that emphasized effortless automation and immediate results. Understanding that labor and the institutional knowledge built during failures is essential to ethical technological deployment. Today we are in a new phase of AI enthusiasm driven by different models and datasets. Large language models and cloud economics have changed the technological landscape in ways that would have seemed speculative a decade earlier. Yet many of the old lessons still apply because messy institutional problems have not disappeared with better models. The tension between technological possibility and organizational readiness remains a decisive factor for any ambitious AI initiative. The philosophical twist of Watson's arc is that truth often arrives slower than our narratives demand. We crave stories of instant transformation because they simplify complexity and reduce risk in our imaginations. Real transformation usually requires iterative work, accountability, and humility about limitations along the way. Embracing that slower path can lead to more sustainable technological progress and fewer spectacular collapses. When we look back at IBM Watson, we see a mixture of triumph, error, and useful knowledge. The Jeopardy moment was real. The engineering achievements were real, and the failures in business execution were also painfully real. That complexity resists simple moralizing and instead invites careful study about how technologies meet institutions. Studying Watson honestly gives us better playbooks for aligning technical capability with social and economic realities. So what should leaders learn from the rise and fall of Watson in plain practical terms? First, measure pilots against representative data and operational constraints, rather than curated success stories. Second, align sales narratives with realistic deployment costs and timelines so that customers receive honest expectations. Third, treat AI as an augmentation that requires institutional adaptation rather than a plug-and-play replacement for expert labor. Finally, if you are building or buying AI today, take a moment to balance optimism with skepticism. Innovation demands ambition, but ambition unmoored from humility creates fragile projects and disappointed stakeholders. The future of AI will be shaped as much by honest communication and rigorous evaluation as it will be by breakthroughs in models and compute. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe.